Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Bills are marching into their contest against the Dolphins with bad intentions. Also, the Dodgers are entering a nightmare scenario after the Phillies clinched the postseason, and the Chiefs and Texans face must-win games this weekend.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Buffalo Bills are big favorites over the struggling Miami Dolphins. Later tonight, Locked On Bills host Joe Marino sat down with his buddy Locked On Dolphins host Kyle Krabs to break down what could be an ugly game.
Oh, I'm excited. And I'm sure everybody's wondering why they're watching a crossover Thursday episode potentially as early as mid-afternoon on Wednesday. That's what happens when you play on Thursday, right? We can't do a crossover Thursday and post it the same day as the game. We got to give everybody enough time to get prepped for the contest, which I'm excited for as well, but probably very different reasons than you are.
Well, let's get into those dynamics. Miami entering this game 0-2. What's the big storyline, the big talk out of Miami right now?
To quote Mike McDaniel, today is another day closer to death. And this feels like a franchise that's in kind of a death spiral right now, where after the first 2 weeks with the games where you get smashed by the Colts, and then last week you have a narrow loss with a bunch of self-inflicted wounds on the offensive side of the ball trying to mount a game-winning drive. There's been increasing instances of friction with everybody kind of feeling the pressure to win. And Stephen Ross put a statement out after the Week 18 game last year, voicing his confidence in the direction of the football operation, and it gave him this offseason to try to right some of the wrongs and what had kind of been a part of what Chris Greer described as not winning the right way during the early chapters of the Mike McDaniel era, as far as bringing in expensive veterans and those guys kind of running the building, really. And everybody talked a big game. Everybody said all the right things. And then the team came out as flat could be in week one. And then in week two, the players are voicing frustration with the coaches for the personnel packages and the communication. And the coach in week one is talking to the players through the media. And then the players have a behind closed doors meeting where they're talking about playing with accountability for each other and themselves, because the league's going to judge them in a vacuum and doesn't care what the coaching situation is. That according to Albert Breer. So it's just, we're mounding up. And the question is for me less of the matchups in the game, because we know what a lot of those matchups are. We're going to talk about them and exhaust those talking points, but it's who's going to show up? What kind of team investment is there going to be for this game after you kind of felt like you mounted up the pride and you played hard last week, and the defense started slow and then kind of buckled down throughout? There was a couple explosive plays that led to some shorter fields and some field goals and scores, and that helped decide the game. And then the offense imploded twice in the final 4 minutes with efforts to win the game.
Let me zoom out on Miami and kind of phrase this a certain way, and I'm curious how you respond to this. So obviously there's a lot of tension. I think there's a lot of expectation that this team has lost itself, and we're expecting at some point for them to move on from Mike McDaniel. But if I do zoom out, this is year 4. First 2 years, this team goes to the playoffs. Last year, they're 8-9, and the starting quarterback misses 6 games.
Yeah.
Of course, we know that the Colts game was a disaster. I don't have anything silver lining there. But are we really just 1 inch away? Devin Achane steps out of bounds, like 1 inch away from that being a team that rallied and came from behind and probably, had a great chance to win a football game. And you're talking about, all right, if they're 1-1 going into Buffalo, there's obviously that's not been a very good path for the Miami Dolphins over the last several years, but a schedule that appears manageable. Are we getting ahead of ourselves? Do we need to kind of be mindful of some of those layers, or is this just a coach that's lost the locker room?
So I don't think it's the win record, right? In the same way that they dismissed Brian Flores after they came back from a 1-7 start to finish 9-8. And that was back in 2021. It's the beneath the surface stuff that now, in the face of this pressure and adversity, you're seeing it bubble to the surface with more frequency. You had Mike McDaniel after the Week 2 game talk about everything starts and ends with me. I take responsibility for it. But then in the same breath says, I need to oversee the personnel packages because coaches and players in a critical moment of the game didn't communicate the way that they needed to. And then Frank Smith, the team's offensive coordinator, who's not the play caller, is asked about the play calling in the second half. He's like, yeah, we went back and we found some instances where we got away from the run. Okay, who are you talking to then? You're talking to Mike McDaniel, who calls the plays, in the same way that Mike McDaniel's talking to whatever coaches are responsibility for the personnel packages when you're breaking the huddle with 13 guys off of a 3-minute stoppage and play out a commercial timeout on the 26-yard line on 1st and 10, the minute left in the game to try to win the game. So the competitiveness at times has been in spite of itself with what's going on underneath the hood. So I don't the question for when you choose to make a change in my mind is, when does Stephen Ross say enough is enough? How much of a look do I want to get at any other coach on the staff, potentially on an interim basis, to try to find value for this season? Because once you get to 0-3, there's been one team that's made it to 0-3 since 2000 that's made the playoffs. It was the Texans in 2018. They went 11-5 and won the division. If you go 0-3 with 2 losses in the division, can we have this conversation about what the outlook's going to be? Like, you're not chasing down anybody in the AFC East at that point. Not with the back half of the schedule looking like what it looks like, even if they mount up and they find some wins. I'd be very surprised. So that's the lead story in Miami for Buffalo. Now, you guys start 2-0, convincing win against the Jets, the big comeback in the fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 1. How have things looked? I know there's some questions for the defensive side of the ball for how things went early against Baltimore, but was that matchup based? How do you reflect on the defense? I think would be my big storyline that I'd love to hear from you on.
You can stay up to date all year on the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today, Locked On Bills, and Locked On Dolphins on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Dodgers are fighting for their postseason fate. Before we get to that, the Cubs are back in the playoffs. The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet in the moment. Player props, same-game parlays, jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. The Chicago Cubs are back in the postseason for the first time since 2020.
For the first time since 2020, and for the first time in the Sam Olber, Matt Cozy Locked On Cubs era, the Chicago Cubs are going to the postseason. I'm Sam Olber from the Locked On Cubs podcast, and it doesn't get any better than that. I know it's been a weird road and a weird path, and it started out great, and it's been kind of up and down since, but 162-game season is a long season. It's a lot of baseball. Whenever you get the opportunity to go play in October and to go take your shot at winning a world championship, there's nothing like it. And the Cubs clinched that today. The game itself was a weird one. Cubs were up 4-0 early. Was not a good day for Matthew Boyd. He couldn't hold the lead, but the offense continues to hit without Kyle Tucker, without much from Seiya Suzuki, although he returned today. Big day for Happ, Horner, Ballesteros hit a home run. Maybe he's playing himself into a postseason lineup. All that fun stuff is really going to be great to talk about because the Cubs are going to the playoffs. That is guaranteed, and hopefully in the next couple of days, the fact that they'll be hosting that at Wrigley Field, that 3-game series, will also become official as well. Enjoy today, Cubs fans. It doesn't happen every year.
Elsewhere on the diamond, the Reds get one back over the Cardinals.
The Cincinnati Reds are back to 500. Okay, maybe I'm embellishing my excitement a little bit, but it was nice to see the lineup go. What's up? This is Jeff Carr from the Locked On Reds podcast. And yes, the Reds made it back to 500 with a series win over the St. Louis Cardinals, and the bats got going in a big way. It's funny what happens when you hit home runs. Really wish they'd pay attention to that this offseason and hopefully add some power. But Spencer Steer got back on the board with a big-time homer. The other part about this, though, is another error for Elly De La Cruz. And we're going to talk about it a lot. This offseason is going to be filled with conversation about, do you move Ellie? Do you keep him there? Do you wait? What do you do? But every time he commits an error, it just kind of feels like there's a large group of the fan base now that is just like, move him! I don't know. This has been a tough year for Ellie De La Cruz, but at least the Reds got a win. They come back home with a 4-5 road trip that included 6 games on the West Coast. That's okay, I guess.
The Astros tried to sweep the Rangers in order to keep up with the Mariners in the AL West.
Well, the Astros only need 6 hits and 5 runs to beat Jacob deGrom and the Texas Rangers. Hello, I'm H-Town Wellhouser with Locked on Astros. A huge series sweep. I mean, this team now has won 5 of its last 7 games, scoring 4 runs or more in those games, and they have been on fire. This team just keeps doing it. I mean, Jordan goes down in this series, and they face Jacob deGrom in Game 3. Surely they're not going to sweep, but they do. And on the other side of the tail of the tape is the Seattle Mariners lose, so that means the Astros own a half-game lead in the AL West going into the weekend series, the last home series for the Astros in Daikin Park. And they've got their big dogs up there. We'll talk about it on the next Locked on Astros. I'll be joined by Trevor Hauer. I've been sitting out for the week. Thank y'all for tuning in with Eric and Trevor. Look, man, we're always positive, always Stros here. The work is not finished, but the magic number shrinks every time the Astros win and the Mariners lose. Hopefully when they come to town, they can get a series win, or heck, even a sweep. Might as well, because why? Houston is inevitable.
The Phillies clinched a postseason berth with a win over the Dodgers earlier this week. Now Los Angeles enters a potential nightmare scenario with the season winding down. Locked on Dodgers postcast host Pete Fox broke down last night's series finale against Philly and looked ahead to the final 10 games of the regular season. It's a big group of games.
Guys have got to do their jobs. The plan was 5 innings. He has gone up to 80-something pitches this year during one of his starts in 5 innings. And it's like, man, okay, when you're doing something like that, especially with the way that the bullpen is played, and we're going to dive deep into the bullpen here in a bit, you let the pitcher go out there, and especially Shohei Ohtani, he was like, I could have gone back out there, but whatever the manager needs, whatever the front office needs is what I'm going to do. That's the part where it's like frustrates us, where it's like, dude, let the players play. You've said it before, and it's true, Travis. It's not a formula. It's not an equation. Let the feel of the game be the one that commands the way that you played. I understand also they want to avoid the risk of any injury for not only year 2 of the Shohei Ohtani experience in LA, but for years 3 to 10.
Look, there's a lot in that quote. There's a lot there. I'm gonna try to touch on as much of it as I can. Number one, that's really, I'm racking my brain right now, Harry, trying to think of another time where Dave Roberts blamed his players the way that he just did right there. That's very, very, very rare for him. That was a, hey, look, he said because what he basically said when I feel okay was he said he didn't want to go. So he took that off of himself and put that back on Shohei. Then what he said was players need to do their jobs would be, hey, you guys wouldn't be asking about this if Justin Robleski and Blake Trinan didn't absolutely, mess up the way that they did.
The bed.
Yeah, that's a much better way to say it. I'm surprised that he did that. Look, you said it. I was outraged. My phone was blowing up last night with other Dodger fans talking to me about this, that he was cruising. And this idea that there's some magical innings marker that he has decided in the game beforehand that he can't go past. I understand if it was a laborious 5 innings and he was up there in 80, 90 pitches and it's time to come out, that's fine. It wasn't. What's the difference between 5 innings, 6 innings, 7 innings, as long as the pitch count is relatively how many? It just doesn't make much of a difference to me. I understand the desire and the impulse to protect him and keep him as healthy as possible. But you also have him here to win baseball games now, today, tomorrow, this season, this postseason, and constantly say, "Oh, well, we got to keep him healthy for later." Why? Like this idea, like you have a chance to win the World Series again. Let's go try to win the World Series again. If he gets hurt, and you figure it out from that point. You know what would have happened had they sent him back out there for a 6th inning? Nothing. Nothing. He would have been fine. And you could have sent him out there for a 7th inning. You know what would have happened? Nothing. He would have been fine. And if he gets hurt, then he gets hurt. This idea that if you protect these guys, they all get hurt anyway. It doesn't make any sense to me why they have these decisions that are made before the actual game is played, because I don't know if I've seen him look more free and easy than I did yesterday against the Phillies. And it was just deeply disappointing. And that he batted it back at his players, I find really, really interesting, because that's just not what he typically does.
And Travis, he asked him if he could go just in case he could have. And maybe in the postseason, we'll let him go 6 innings. Start letting him get used to 6 damn innings if you're going to play him 6 innings in the playoffs. Exactly. It's September 17th. The playoffs start in less than 2 weeks.
I agree. And you don't have it's not like you have this murderer's row of bullpen guys that are going to lock this down. The second you went to the bullpen, every Dodger fan went, all right, let's see what happens now. And we saw what happened now. It was a catastrophe. And you're going to have to let these guys go. You're going to have to figure out a way to get Emmett Sheehan to pitch out of the bullpen. Now, all of a sudden, Clayton Kershaw might be your best relief pitching option. This is a hot mess on the back end. And now we're doing those goofy predetermined decisions again. Same thing with Sheehan the night before. Like Sheehan gave up one. Okay, Emmett Sheehan gave up 1 hit and they took him out of the game. Shohei Ohtani gave up no hits and they took him out of the game. What do you have to do to stay in the game? Other than some person with a statistics degree, a math degree, some sort of elevated, computer science genius guy says, no, you can only do this. And then they get hurt anyway. All of them, all the time. It's incredibly disappointing. And deeply frustrating.
I was going to say, strike out every batter on 3 pitches and you might stay in the game the whole way, but that would mean that Shohei Ohtani would get 81 pitches. So maybe they would be like, oh, no, that's too much. Let's keep it at 60, at 70. And look, as much history as Ohtani's making, it doesn't mean much if the team around him can't hold up their end of the bargain, just as Robert said there. And unfortunately for the Dodgers, the same night Ohtani was dominant for 5 no-hit innings, the bullpen completely unraveled. And next on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers relievers turned a comfortable 4-run lead into an absolute nightmare at Chavez Ravine, which Travis lived in person, and they're making fans wonder if this bullpen can be trusted in October.
Stay up to date all year on the LA Dodgers by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Dodgers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Chiefs and Texans are in must-win mode, but one of their seasons isn't over yet. Kansas City Chiefs and Houston Texans have started the season off 0-2. Locked On NFL hosts Tyler Rowland and Luke Braun explain why the season might already be over for the Texans, but it's not for the Chiefs, who desperately need a win this weekend.
And I do agree there, Luke. Like, they played 2 really, really good football teams. They're missing a ton of their top weapons. I'm not ready to pronounce the Chiefs dead, and I think anybody who is making a big mistake.
Yeah, I think you're just wish casting if you're like a Raiders fan that's very upset going, well, hey, at least the Chiefs are down in the dumps.
We're 1-1,
Yeah, right. Yeah, there are definitely times when you go, gosh, they're really going to need that playoff position, that for like playoff positioning and stuff. And that's really what I'm thinking about for the Chiefs, that when they, rattle off 10 wins and totally figure everything out, but then they're going to need like a tiebreaker against somebody, or they're going to need like that one extra win where, usually like a lot of these years they get the 1 seed by like 1 game and they don't have that one this time. So I see the Chiefs maybe having to go on the road a little bit on the playoffs, and maybe that's going to be the difference. These little back pocket losses are going to, rear their ugly heads in January when we start doing all that playoff predictor math. But like the Chiefs have earned way too much benefit of the doubt for us to look at 2 losses to a couple of pretty good teams in the Chargers and the Eagles. And like, I mean, I'm calling the Eagles best team in the league. Like, I don't know what it's Chris is hedging that a little bit, but yeah, that's when they struggle with like one of the sort of also rans of the NFL, or like some team that we think is going to be drafting top 15, and then they're struggling, then we'll start sounding the alarms. But they've earned too much. Let's let them figure it out.
I also saw the slight shade from Chris there when he said the Chargers are like a top 15 team. I think the Chargers might be a little bit
Chargers
better.
are killing it, yeah.
Than top 15. They're a top 5 team right now and much better than Kansas City. But you're right. I mean, it's been at different levels, but people have proclaimed the Chiefs dead or, oh, they're not going to the Super Bowl this year or whatever. The last 2 seasons. And then they ended up in the Super Bowl both years. I think the Chiefs will find a way to be fine. But I will say this, Luke. They play the Giants this week. If they lose to the Giants, we can sound the
then we're
alarm
good
bells.
at saying what's up. Yep.
Right. But after that, I mean, you know, they play the Giants, then they have to play the Ravens, then the Jags, but then they play the Lions, then the Raiders, but then they play the Commanders. Like, it's not a walkover schedule here, but I think out of those 6 games we just mentioned, I think Kansas City is winning 4 of them at minimum, and then they would end up 4-4 at the end of an 8-game stretch. So I'm not overly concerned, but the Texans are a team I'm concerned with, and I am willing to say the Texans will not make the playoffs. And maybe it's confirmation bias, it's what I want, maybe I'm wish casting, but I didn't have the Texans making the playoffs before the season because I thought their offensive line and their new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, I did not trust them. I thought they got worse on the offensive line. I had no faith that Caley, who's never called plays before in the NFL, I had no faith that he would be an upgrade on Bobby Slowick, who they ran out of town a year after him getting head coaching interviews. And some of the problems that I expected are showing up. And that's what the Texans look like out there. I don't think that the Texans are going to come back from this and make the playoffs. And whether I'm right or wrong, we'll see. But I think the Chiefs and the Texans are in totally different places.
The Chiefs still have Patrick Mahomes. They still have Andy Reid. Rashee Rice is coming back from suspension at some point. Xavier Worthy is coming back from injury at some point. They'll get the offense figured out. I have no doubt about that. Whether they can be Super Bowl caliber, I guess we'll see. It does feel like the Ravens, the Bills, maybe even the Chargers are ahead of them in the AFC right now. The Texans, this is Owen Tombstone for them. And not because their division is so difficult. It's not. The Colts are not going to stay the best team in the NFL for the rest of the season. The Jaguars are still kind of a mess and probably should, frankly, be 2-0. But this offense isn't any better than it was last year. In fact, in some statistical categories, it's worse. The run game is still a nightmare. The offensive line is a disaster. And the offensive coordinator doesn't seem to have been a marked improvement over Bobby Slowick from a year ago. And for some reason, everyone is still under the assumption that CJ Stroud is a top 10 quarterback when we have not seen CJ Stroud play like a top 10 quarterback in his NFL career. Let me repeat that. We have not seen CJ Stroud play like a top 10 quarterback in his NFL career, not for any extended period of time. It just hasn't happened. He was put in that category as a rookie because he performed so well for a rookie. He had a phenomenal rookie quarterback season by just quarterback standards. It was fine. The productivity, the efficiency, the advanced metrics, it was a fine quarterback season. Last year was bad. It was bad, like bottom 6, bottom 8 efficiency stats, one of the least productive and efficient starters in the NFL. And it is not any better this year.